before I forget, I want to do, I guess, what you'd call the rest of the story. You did that session with Sid Simonsen. And in one of the sessions, Sid talked about the tunnel at the house in town. Well, the house in town was in the area of the Porter house and Tyler Hillman's house. The bank went out farther at that time. And this old house, as I recall, had one of those red asphalt shingle roofs, and the siding was asbestos shingles. And it sat out in the middle of this overgrown, weedy yard, and it was kind of spooky. Well, when we were kids, and I'm talking preteen stuff, it was kind of spooky. By the time I got to be a freshman in high school, and I came back to live with my grandparents and go to school, Jay Rosendahl and I were a little more gutsy. So we went over wandering around there one day and found out that it was unlocked. So we go in and look around, and of course for all the years of just sitting there, it's just accumulation of dust and stuff. We go down the basement. We'd always heard stories about this tunnel. Well, here is this fresh wood. I mean, it hadn't been there for, 100 years, so it was fairly fresh wood. Framed and a door in there, but it had a big padlock on it. But the dirt over the top was worn away. So we climbed up, shined a light, and looked back, and you could see this went out. This was the tunnel. So we proceeded to go out and go down to the riverbank. Well, Sid didn't make it clear, but they had a barn out there. And in the wintertime, they wouldn't have to mess with the snow. They'd just go through the tunnel. So we did some moving around, but there was way too much dirt. We found the opening. So we were in shop class, took an old piece of bumper, welded a pipe and some bracing on it, made a huge hole, and we spent the next several days after school mucking out all the dirt to be able to get in there, so we had our secret hideaway, which was fine for a year or so. Then they hauled me back to California, and apparently some other kids found out about it, and their parents freaked out. Last I heard, somebody dynamited the thing. So.
It was probably a bit of a safety hazard.
No shoring in there, just dirt, So.
Who has time for that?
Yeah, those were the days.
So, were you born here, or?
Well, born in California, raised here.
Okay.
The house that over the last several, that's even before your time. The vacant lot north of the Methodist church across the street used to be our house. We lived there till 1956 and moved, and Tom Laycock got it, and he raised his family there for years and years. And then the night that we flew back, my mother and I and Jay and Opal and Darren Rosendahl flew into Billings to come up for Johnny Porteen's 80th birthday in the middle of December, January. I was in December. Doodad met us at the airport. First words out of his mouth, not "Hi, how are you? Your house blew up." They'd had a gas leak. They were gone somewhere, and there was a gas leak at the house, and boom. And we got back here, it was way after dark. And that had happened in the morning, and way after dark when we got here, the place was still a pile of glowing embers. So.
Well, it's good that no one was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there was plenty of those explosions where people were home.
Yeah, unfortunately, those things did happen. So, yeah, we moved in 56. I was going into the 5th grade. And then I came back every summer. It was one of those things. They moved me out there, but I hated every minute of it, But after I came back and finished school here, through the good graces of your grandparents, it just, I didn't realize that I was capable of doing more than I realized, I thought, well, I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to do that. Well, it took me a lot of years to realize that you can do just about anything you want to do if you put your mind to it, so.
Willpower goes a long way.
Yeah. It's like I would do stuff and people say, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I says, well, I couldn't until I tried, so.
And you were talking about my grandparents, and there used to be a lot more buildings on that place. They've been steadily disappearing since I've been there.
Well, that place goes way back. That used to be mixed dairy. And when I was a little shaver, I'd say 6, 5, they still delivered milk in town. And they would have the milk in bottles in these wire racks in the back of this truck. It was like an old panel truck. And then we'd ride around on the tailgate. And of course, we'd always have to steal a handful of ice and eat it. Of course, nobody ever bothered to tell us that ice came out of the river or the creek or someplace, But yeah, I remember that. In fact, one time when I was living out there with your grandparents, I went wandering around and there was an old fender kind of buried in the dirt that I would have been willing to bet was something off either the original old milk truck or, a part for it anyway. But
yeah, there's a lot of buried equipment out there.
that's the way it went sometimes.
Yeah, so there was a lot of junk out there. I just realized I never thought about it before. I mean, me and Trey, we've both grown up with the dump out here, but before the county took care of the dump, the whole town used to go out at Shoemaker, was it?
No, it was on the west side of the road going up to the South Bench Hill. Just past the turn into the cemetery, there's a car gate that is blocked with old bed springs and stuff. I'm sure you've seen that. Well, that used to be the road to the dump. And the thing that was interesting about it is, I guess you could say it was self-cleaning, because about every 3 or 4 years, it would catch on fire. Sometimes it could have been because people dumped hot ashes, but as often as not, it was something, for instance, like a piece of glass that was set just right over some papers, and the sun would beat through it and, get the thing ignited. And it'd burn up all the burnables. It'd probably take 4 or 5 days for the whole thing to burn. Start all over again. So, but they got all crazy. Oh, you couldn't do this. So then their environmental impact didn't have any impact because it's what they wanted to do. Because up just kind of to the north and a little bit to the west of the dump, I think it was to the west, could have been at least, was a sandstone formation that sloped up, and I don't know exactly how narrow it got, but it was small enough that it was referred to as needlepoint. And that was someplace that was a destination as a kid. Let's go up to needlepoint. Well, they bulldozed that sucker to fill in the dump, so they weren't too concerned about the environmental impact.
So when did they put the dump in over here? Is that just
Oh,
in the
I'm
90s?
sure that had to be in the 60s. Because all this, there was a lot of progress in the, like the 68 era. I graduated in 64 and pretty much was gone for 30 years. A couple trips back, but always keep track of things, But new post office went in, and about 68, the new Legion Hall in about 68. The school was around there. So all of this, modernization and new stuff. And interestingly enough, Westerman Rosendahl decided, geez, everybody's putting in all this new stuff, we better modernize. So some of their classic old wonderful things that made them such a fine store, they got rid of. And put in, some of this pegboard paneling and painted it new, soft, modern colors and everything. Well, Jay and Opal moved into a new place out in California and needed some parts, I don't remember, picture hangers or some such thing. Just getting there, doesn't know the area too well, so gets out a phone book, looks up, we find this hardware store in the neighboring town. We jump in the car and we go up to the hardware store, walk in, it was like walking into 1950s Westerman Rosendahl. So, that's the way they do it.
So you're talking about the new post office. So the post office before that, was that the one on the corner?
The one on the corner, down on the end. I don't know if he still does, but Frankie Jensen had some of the old post office boxes out of there. I owned that building for a while too. But yeah, Stubbs Rudder was the postmaster there when I was a kid. And he and his family lived right behind the post office. And he was a rawhide artist. He braided hackamores and quirts and all kinds of things. He was fantastic. And he had a barn up across the railroad tracks, pretty close to where that little red tin building is. Mm-hmm. That has a corral around it, pretty close to that. It was a little more to the west. And he had, I don't know, 3 or 4 horses.
So you also mentioned the Legion, so that would have been the Majestic Theater, or did people call it that, or did they call it the Legion?
Well, it was the Majestic Theater before it became the Legion Hall. I do believe that Craig Rutherford still has the sign from the Majestic Theater.
Oh, really?
And the building itself is at Boucher's. And they used to, Hinsdale's first fire truck was a late 40s Army surplus. I think it was a Dodge. And it was just olive drab. And it had a pull start motor on the back with a water tank and a hose, and that was their fire truck. And they parked it in the basement of the Legion Hall. And the back doors would open on the outside and then open them on the inside, and then there was a ramp going up. That truck is now owned by, I think it's one of the Canodals, just on the west side of Glasgow, that house, and then that yard. He's now got a fence around it, but with all the cars and stuff parked out there, it was parked there for a while. So,
did the Legion? Did they have a lot of dances and stuff? Was that
oh
really
my
the community
goodness,
center?
that was that was major social event. I won't say they had one once a week. I mean once a month, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't close to that. There was also a touring show that came through, Little Oscar. Mm-hmm. And they had a troupe of, half a dozen actors or so, and they'd put on these little plays, and it didn't cost much, maybe a nickel to get in, a dime or whatever. And of course they sold popcorn and candy and all that stuff. But no, that Legion Hall, that was the real center of activity in Hinsdale. It had a elevated stage. It had a stage width roll-up curtain that was painted with a the main scene in the middle was scenic. It was, I'll say it was like this picture over here, a cowboy on a horse chasing cows or something. But then there was little panels along the side that were painted in, that were paid for by businesses to advertise their businesses. And I suppose they'd buy them for a year and then either renew or somebody else would get painted in. And they had a row of footlights along the front. One of the other things that used to go on there was square dancing. And they had, I can't remember, I think Sanders or Saunders, lady's name, used to bring her record player and play and call the square dances. Well, here I was, kid, I'm just sitting up there, nothing to do, and I'm getting bored. And I find this big old screwdriver about this long. I'm just kind of messing with it, and I look down, and here's a piece of broken light bulb in one of the light sockets. Well, I wasn't real educated as to electricity and that sort of thing, so I reached down and I'm flicking it. Well, as long as I wasn't making contact with 2 points, I was fine, but suddenly I did, and sprayed sparks all over the first 2 rows of dancers. Needless to say, they didn't let me sit there anymore.
Was the bandstand still around?
No, the bandstand was gone before my memory kicks in. That Legion Monument has always been there, and that was always a challenge for us little kids to see if we could climb up to the top. So that was always exciting. But yeah, like now they have the FFA park up here, well, up on the corner of the highway. You know, when I was growing up, that was McIlvaine's. Bob McIlvaine had a 66 station there. And then across the street in what is the parking lot, the south parking lot for the Legion Hall, that was his bulk plant.
Oh.
And then on the next corner was the Farmers Union, and behind the building and a little bit to the northeast was their bulk plant. And next to that was Eldon Nelson's Texaco station. And down where the Raiders Quick Stop is now was Lucian Reynolds' Standard Station.
We had a lot more gas stations
So
evidently.
we had 4 gas stations, and 2 of them had bulk plants that delivered to the farmers and stuff.
Now we're down to 1.
Yeah, lucky to have it.
And we're actually getting a new store. That's
New
pretty
story,
exciting.
and that's something.
So do you remember the other little communities that have kind of faded, like Vandalia and Beaverton, Genevieve, Teeny?
Well, Genevieve wasn't anything more when I was a kid than it is now. It's just the hall, but they had dances there, probably 2 or 3 a summer. There's some absolutely legendary stories that go along with that. Von Grady was a very large individual. I'm not sure he's as tall as you are, but he probably outweighed you a bit. And he was up there, and somebody, and I won't use names because I'm not absolutely positive that that's the true story, but 2 smaller brothers decided they were going to whoop up on Vaughn, and it wasn't going too well. And one of them that had been discarded to the side jumps on Vaughn's back and bites the top of his ear off. So that's another piece of Genevieve history.
Yeah, it's been a while since they've had a party up there, but we're planning one for this summer. So as far as I know, it's the 100 years since the hall's been built, so I'll have to get that going.
Have you been up there lately?
Yeah, I went up and was visiting with Matt and Sonia just last week, kind of getting it planned out, and I'd been walked through it this summer. They actually went and shored up the foundation last summer. It's been sided, and they're planning on putting tin up this summer, so it should be in pretty decent condition.
Well, what I was going to wonder about is they used to have what was left, it was just a basement of an old building. But you couldn't tell because it was filled with crushed beer cans. So it was like a swimming pool full of beer cans.
Was that just north of, right by the road there?
I believe it was to the south, but I won't swear.
Well, north of the hall, but before the road, kinda? Or was it south of the hall?
South of the hall.
Because the store and post office were between the hall and the road, and then there was a blacksmith to the north of that, but I don't know what would have been south of the hall.
Could have been, my memory's bad.
Well, it probably was a building of some sort, but who knows what it was.